Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Practical Pet Business. Thanks for joining us. We know you've got a lot on your plate. Laura and I appreciate you. We appreciate your time. And we've got another question that's come in from the group here. And I think this one's pretty interesting, Lauren. This one is independent contractors versus employees, the advantages, the disadvantages, what to consider. And I know this is something that you have some experience on the store side. So I'd love to hear. Let's kick it off with you.
Yeah. You know where I see that come up the most is with groomers. Because gosh, for a while there, it was really a hot topic. But I see it still where, they'll decide, stores will say, should I make my groomer, I'm adding grooming, should I make the groomers independent contractors or employees? And it's like, gosh, there are legal guidelines for this, for your state that you have to
Right.
follow. So it's a pretty cut and dried answer, but um, it just, for one option, people are like, well, I don't want to deal with the taxes. It's like, yeah, the government doesn't decide, doesn't let you decide whether or not you want to deal with the taxes. Um, if if you have anybody working on your property as an independent contractor, there's a number of factors you need to look at besides the legal definition in your state for independent contractor. There's state and federal laws for that. But you need to talk to your insurance company and see how they view an independent contractor on your property. Because especially if it's anything that involves where that person can get hurt, any of the animals can be hurt under their care, or any of the people affiliated with that person doing business on your property getting hurt. How do you enter into that? I don't personally like it. If I have the store, first of all, it's my business, and I have very I had very stringent guidelines and expectations, and I didn't want to leave those up to someone else's decision. I wanted to control all that. I wanted to be sure that when consumers came in to participate in that part of the business, that they adhered to certain things as well. I was also in an extremely litigious state that it was a constant at the front of my mind thought all the time to be sure that we were protected in every way, shape, and form. Um, but another phone line, that person handles the clients themselves. If they're an independent contractor, you don't make their schedule. I didn't like that. I wanted people to be able to have an expectation. I didn't want any negativity that was generated by them to fall back on the store. It's one thing after another that just made it highly unattractive to me to have anybody be an IC. The other factor that was really probably one of the top two was I had been in business for I don't know, 2, 3 years at the time before I started to add grooming. And they were all my customers. So I was just going to hand over my customers that I had worked so hard to bring into the store, because really it became oh, I didn't know you offered grooming. Oh, I didn't know you had grooming. It wasn't the grooming was generating. That took another couple of years and word of mouth before that really took over. In the meantime, with all the customers we had, when we first started grooming for a few years, we were booked up a year in advance. So those were already the customers we had. What if that person left? I wanted to be sure they were our customers. Now, granted, they can go anywhere they want, but if they're an employee, I'm not going to tell them where they went if they were to go anywhere. I can't give out personal information on an employee anyway. But
Yeah.
but I also had a contract at the time that they couldn't take customer information with them. And there were a couple times that verged on becoming litigious. but didn't end up that way. But but I didn't like anything about the IC thing at all for a business that I had my every waking moment, heart, soul, and blood invested in,
Right.
and leaving that at the hands or the whim of somebody who didn't take it as seriously because they didn't build it.
Right. And I think you just hit on it. The loyalty part there is typically not something that comes along with an independent contractor. Just in the name itself, independent. So, that's one of those that you look at and you say, well, if that is going to have an impact on my brand, my approach, my perception from my clients, do I have enough control in that situation to be able to make it a positive? This is one of those that, you could argue areas here that are positive, areas there that are negative. But at the end of the day, it is, and I like what you said, this is something you're putting your heart, soul, sweat into. When you don't have someone that's vested in that succession, that's a chink in the armor. It is something that becomes problematic. Um, so I'm with you. I what's interesting too is there is in my experience with independent contractors as well, there is a feeling of, well, you're lucky I'm doing this. You're not paying me benefits. You're not paying me. Well, that's why we went with the independent contract
Right.
top, because you said those things weren't important. You would rather have this. You would rather have that. I gave you those things, but you're not feeling like you're getting the warmth and welcome of being an employee of this company. And, I was in a situation where I've had to, point that out, like, that was the way you wanted it. That was the way it made sense for this to move forward. Um, but it is concerning. And I mean, that the reality is too, like you said, rules, regulations, liability, all of those different things. And that's that other part of it is this person is speaking on your behalf, whether you want them to or not. And I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake of, well, they're an independent contractor. Okay, but do they walk around with a sign on their shirt that says anything this independent contractor says, cannot and should not reflect the opinions of, you guys all have heard the back
Yep.
end there. Because Lorin says a lot of crazy things. And so, the reality is, if that's not happening, you're still liable. So that's just a false narrative and a false sense of security. Oh, they're an independent contractor. No, that's not the reason to do this. But it should be a concern as well, because they may feel completely opposite the way you do. And as an independent contractor, they're representing themselves independently in what they do. Yes, they're in alignment on things that they're doing for your store, for your company, for this manufacturer, but they are not all in and speaking required to speak at all times with your voice. And I
Right.
think that's the concern that I have in that. That being said, I will say I've known a number of independent contractors who have been tremendous assets to companies that were looking to grow, looking to expand, especially in the manufacturer and the vendor side of things. Um, so there is a time, a place, and a space. But it's hard. There's always that uncertainty. Are you getting everything you're agreeing to, you're paying for, etc., or are you just getting what you can? And I think that's where that uncertainty and a little bit of uncertainty can really undo a lot of goodwill. And
Right.
so I like having the certainty whenever possible.
Well, it's like, well, and to what you said about they want their cake and eat it too. They want all the benefits of being an employee with none of the responsibility, accountability, or control over them. So, it is very much a cake and eat it too. But if you look at even the big box stores, there's a really good example of they run every aspect of it themselves.
Mhm.
They own their vet clinics, they own their grooming facilities. If it was so advantageous, they wouldn't be paying the wages and accompanying taxes for all of those individual departments. But I personally think that if you want to be sure that the narrative is exactly as you have it set in your head, then all aspects of it need to be under control. I had one of the first groomers that I hired, I overheard her telling a client, she was an employee too. I overheard her telling the client that Lorin doesn't believe in uh I think it was electric collars.
Mm.
But I personally, blah, 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 and she doesn't really know what she's talking about. I waited until it was done and I called her to the back and I was like, I don't really care what your opinion is in my store, you know,
Right.
especially on something like that. So if you can't adhere to the policy that is in place for the store, then you should probably go to work for yourself somewhere. But you're not working for yourself here currently. So either don't talk to the clients or adhere to our guidelines. And we don't support electronic collars. So not telling anybody that they shouldn't or anything. We don't. Um, and then to go against something that we take so seriously, which is, information and that sort of thing, and to go against that. And I don't think she'd even been an employee for more than a week or two at the time. But you run into that. What do you do if they go up to the groomer that's an independent contractor and they say, "What kind of shampoo do you use?" And the groomer says, "Well, I use this." "Oh, do they sell that here at the store?" "No, but I can get it for you.
Mm.
I'll have it the
Okay.
next time you come in,
Yeah.
and I'll just add it to your bill." And all of a sudden they're taking business from you. So there's a number of factors to take a look at. These are people that are running a business inside your business. And I think that is fraught with problems.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to look at it. They're giving you time. Um, and I certainly don't want to, go to the negative on everything, but it is that risk reward thing, right?
Mhm.
Are they also giving you the energy? Are they giving you the effort, the understanding that you have and your full-time employees have? Um, as opposed to, hey, this is my feeling. If someone doesn't like it, I'm an independent contractor anyway. And by the way, for what it's worth, I've been an independent contractor many times.
I am one right now.
Yeah, exactly. So this is certainly not anti-independent contractors. There are
No.
plenty of times where it is. I think in the store environment, it's very different, and that's the discussion we've been focused on. I do want to shift a little bit though, um, on independent contractors. Working with vendors, with stores, because there's also those times where there are seasonal things. There are things that come up or initiatives that you may have where I do think a independent contractor can be a really good solution for folks because you've got a specific goal in mind. It's very narrow in time and scope. And, I found when I had those types of situations, um, overwhelmingly, I had really good experiences. Um, I've also had a good experience with a couple of independent long term folks, but throughout that, we really had great communication, great balance. We both knew what we were getting out of it. And when we got out of balance, we would call each other out on that and say, hey, a little bit concerned because you're asking this or you're asking that. And sometimes you have to have those, come to Jesus meetings of like, hey, yeah, this is an expectation. It's not
Right.
a feel like it. But overall, I think communication, if you're going to go that route, can really drive things. It's just an essential. It has to be there. What's your thought on seasonal and event based things and how to work maybe an independent contractor into that?
So I am an independent contractor right now for a few different situations. So I'm glad you called out. We're not bashing ICs at all. Um, I don't, I want anybody, again, keep in mind that my thought process on that has a lot to do with the fact that my business was, again, located in the most litigious state in the country. Um, so
Do
I
you miss
wanted
that
to,
state?
I'm sorry,
Do you miss that state?
I don't at all, now that you mention it. I love living in Texas. Um, but I always had to think about it was in every single thing in every minute of the day. I had to constantly be looking at the variables. I mean, my husband and I go places now and we go like, oh, lawsuit, ooh, problem, because
Sure.
it's like here they don't even think about it. It's like, well, if you're dumb enough to walk there, then that's on you. We're not going to be sued over it. And I'm like, I can't even get my head out of that. Um, so even for seasonal or whatever, I would just have a one-page agreement written up, that all parties signed that said this is the expected amount of time, you know, should either party wish to extend, beyond this time, there'll be a conversation, with that. But
Mutual
I,
agreement, mutual
I,
conversation. Yeah.
yeah, I would still make them an employee. I don't want to, I don't, and nothing, this is about perception. And so not being 100% certain of what the perception is of the other party as to what an IC or being an IC means. For me, if I'm an IC with a company, I know that company. I know that company's expectations. I'm going to follow that. I don't need to be told. I absolutely understand how that plays out. But a lot of people, I see it in posts and I hear it all the time where people think an IC gets to do this or that, or nobody can tell them their schedule or expectations are out of line and that kind of thing. So just to cover my bases and be sure that I had the coverage that I needed and being able to count on it, I would still make an employee, for a designated amount of time with any future to be discussed subsequently.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think there are my personal feeling there are times when the IC approach is better for everybody involved. Give you an example, trade shows. I see a lot of independent contractors at the trade shows. Um, they're there for a variety of reasons. Some of
But
it,
they're not at the store. They're not at the store level.
no, correct, 100%. And I just want to make that distinction
Yeah.
there.
And that's my
There are
caveat.
times, yeah, when there are events. Being the photographer, the holiday season rolled around, yeah, I had my own studio, but there were plenty of wonderful places that wanted me to come in and set up a scene and, do holiday photos for their client base. Love that. It was great. But that meant, well, we were either shutting down our physical studio, which I wasn't willing to do, or I could, hire two people who had helped us on other things on a basis. So I think, to your point, you got to look at what's the potential impact to your business.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. If I was running a store, physical location, having them in there, I've got to have real clarity. And I think that's the problem these days, right? Real clarity means something different these days. And depending on the state you're in and the litigious
Yeah.
world and all the rest of that, than it did years ago. And it's interesting because I'm not even sure I would want to take the liability to go into some of the stores that we went to
Right.
previous, just from the standpoint of my own people. So there are a lot of things to look at. Um,
Well,
and I
there are
would
some, go ahead.
go ahead.
There's some demo reps that are independent contracts for
Great call.
brands,
Yeah.
and that makes sense.
Yes.
There are, I've had independent contractors come and do events at the store. I had a trainer that was an independent contractor, but she did everything outside of the store. The store was a meeting place,
Right.
and our customers signed up directly with her. We were just a referral kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, So, yes, my viewpoint of that strict, oh God, no ICs kind of thing is more from an operational standpoint of having a store. But there's absolutely, when you're talking about being a manufacturer, being a distributor, those sorts of things, there's plenty of opportunity for IC in that world.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you called out too, not just the demo folks, but the trainers, because
Mhm.
that's one of the areas where I've seen independent contractors work tremendously.
They
Not
do.
only manufacturer reps, um, my good friend Denise, co-author on the Pet Safety Bible, she has been doing first aid training for decades. And in, I would assume, almost every situation, she's coming in as an independent contractor. I like the suggestion there too. The folks sometimes are enrolling on her site, others were enrolling on the store site. But I like having that communication between the two of you of how are we going to handle this? How far you want to go? But it's interesting because I know I still hear from some of the stores that she's at and going to. Um, and it's been tremendously positive. So there are some positive ways. I think when it's on a longer period of time, it's like anything else. The shine starts to come off of the opportunity, how I'm being treated. One interaction can jade everything. So,
Yeah.
like those quicker ones for that independent contractor. But that all being said, I mean, great conversation. I really, I can see why they were asking that question of us. And hey, if you've got a question out there that you want us to tackle, let us know. Send us an email, practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Visit us on all of the different social media platforms that we're on, wherever you listen to our podcast, wherever you watch the videos. Thank you, because we know you've got a limited amount of time, and sharing any of that with us is greatly appreciated. So thank you. Thank you, Lorin.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.